I'm gonna hide this tape when I'm finished. If none of us make it, at least there'll be some kind of a record. The storm's been hitting us pretty hard now for 48 hours. We still have nothing to go on. One other thing. I think it rips through your clothes when it takes you over. We're all very tired. There's nothing else I can do. Just wait.
Well, hello everyone, it's Core and we're back with a look at the sequel game to the 1982 film, John Carpenter's The Thing. That film is definitely one of the most influential pieces of horror media ever, especially for body horror. But before we get to discussing the game and history, I'd like to ask y'all to support both the video however y'all feel, as well as supporting the lovely artist Kato Phoenix. Now let's begin with the story, history, and development of this game, and some of the film that preceded it, shall we? Before we discuss the story, we need to talk about the film, as this game is a direct sequel and takes place shortly after the ending. John Carpenter's The Thing is a horror film that takes place in the Antarctic, at a government research facility. During the events of the films, a shape-shifting alien infiltrates the crew, and the film plays heavily on the themes of suspense, paranoia, distrust, and body horror, both in horrifying mutations as well as the horror of an alien parasite being able to infest and take over your body and become you. I bring this up because these are all key components of this game. You can never fully trust NPCs and allies, because you never know if one of them might get infected in the combat and wait till it's time to ambush you. Now this sequel game starts in the burned out wreckage of the research facility from the end of the movie and leads eventually to other facilities located around the Arctic waste. You take the role of Captain Blake, one of the members of a U.S. military facility sent to investigate the research facility and discover what happened there, as well as destroying any potential infection. As you progress through the game, you'll learn more about the virus, as well as the government's attempts to harness and weaponize the virus for its own efforts. Now on the development side of things, this game was created by Computer Artworks and published by both WEVIDI, which you may know for Half-Life Blue Shift, as well as the PS2 port of Half-Life, and Fear, as well as Konami, which you would know for Metal Gear, Silent Hill, as well as dozens of 80s and 90s arcade games. Published in 2002, this game began development in 2000 when Universal was looking for whatever films in their back catalog that they could adapt into the ever-growing popularity of video games. Computer Artworks was given the opportunity to pitch their potential to the owners, which they did by reskinning a level from a previous game and made a Thing-like boss fight, which impressed them enough to not only be given the license, but a rather lax oversight and given creative freedom to add their own concepts to the story and lore, which I think worked out nicely. There was also a sequel in works for this game, but unfortunately the developers ran out of money and went bankrupt before they could finish the game. But there is some interesting concept art and work in progress builds out there you can see. There's also a remaster of this game coming out this year from Night Dive Studios, who are known for their faithful and solid remasters and re-releases of many older titles such as Doom 64, Blood, Turok, and more. One last little fun fact to mention is the fact that John Carpenter himself actually voices a character in the game, which I think is really cool and even gives his endorsement on the back of the package. Now let's move on to the gameplay, shall we? If you've ever wanted a game where you cannot even trust your allies at all times, and the feeling is mutual, then this is the game for you. There are very few games that play with your feelings of distrust, paranoia, and anxiety, quite like The Thing. There's a full squad system in this game, and anyone in your squad can be infected and in hiding, or can become infected throughout the course of combat, and will at a certain point mutate into a thing to try and bring your miserable life to an end. The NPCs all know this too, and many of them will refuse to trust you or even work with you unless you can earn their trust by providing them weapons, ammo, or using one of the very rare hypo blood tests, which work like in the film, but instead of a red hot poker or a blood pool, a chemical is mixed with the blood that's drawn out. If nothing happens, they or you are clean, and if the syringe pops, well, the jig is up and the imposter will rapidly mutate into a combat form in an attempt to brutally maul your face.
You got the kit? Good. The report said the hypo contains a chemical that reacts with blood. Do it. We'll soon know, one way or another.
Now I'm gonna show you what I already know.
Though don't get too comfortable even if the test shows in the clear, because if injured by a thing, they run the risk of infection and can turn on you later. And annoyingly though, sometimes an NPC will just be scripted to turn when you hit a trigger, which means that if you know where they turn and when, you may be better off killing them before they turn and become a harder fight. Another thing to remember about the squad is that they all have different personalities and breaking points. Leave them in an area with a ton of blood and gore, and some of them may start to panic and act erratically, even attacking you or the others in fear. Pay attention to the icon above a squattie's head, and if you see a timer symbol, you need to move them ASAP. Adrenaline shots can be found in the environment, and they can be used to calm them down temporarily, but you'll still need to move them. Other neat quirks I've seen is NPCs have other reactions to fear, such as vomiting at a particularly gruesome display, or even pissing themselves in fear. If an NPC is freaking out but you don't want to put them down, you can even use non-lethal means such as a stun gun to make them drop their weapons and pass out for a short while, but this will lower their trust in you. The last thing I should mention about the squad system in-game is that each NPC is one of 3 roles.
Blake, you need anything repaired or even a simple bypass and I'm your man.
If any of you take on any damage, get back to me ASAP and I'll help you out. I'm not carrying any dead bodies back.
I'm locked, loaded, and ready to make shit dead.
A medic, which is capable of healing you and your other allies but cannot heal themselves, so they'll rely on you for your med pack supplies. The engineer, which is a technical expert who can repair any damaged junction box, which is often used to open locked doors or restore power in regions missing it. And finally the soldier, which typically are a bit tankier than the other 2, while also being a better aim with their weapons. So giving them high damage weapons such as machine guns or flamethrowers is a good choice. Now keep in mind that each member of your squad will require you to keep them stocked on ammo, and in some cases even need you to give them a gun and some ammo to start off with. But unlike most games of this era with allied NPCs, they are actually pretty competent in a firefight, though their pathfinding can be janky at times. But hey, for 2002, it's pretty impressive what they managed to pull off, especially compared to other games of their time. I'm sure we're all familiar with bad escort quests from this era. Now, smaller things such as scuttlers can be killed with gunfire alone, but any of the larger forms such as walkers or imposters must be weakened first, before being set on fire to kill them off for good. Otherwise, they will just eat ammunition. And given that this is a survival horror game, healing resources and ammo are very often limited with a few exceptions where ammo seems to be abundant, usually in levels with lots of waves or respawning enemies. Now for basic gameplay, the game is a third-person shooter with the option to aim and fire in first person, which is perfect for when you want to get a sneaky kill on an enemy around the corner. You can strafe from side to side and strafe while running, which is great for circling enemies while you pepper them down. The gunplay is primarily auto-aim with an automatic lock-on that will shoot at the closest enemy when the fire button's held down. The weapon variety in this game is also pretty large and varied. From pistols, submachine guns, and shotguns to grenade launchers, sniper rifles, and grenades. And this is a Thing game, so do not forget all the incendiary weapons that you need to bring down the bigger bioforms. You've got blowtorches, flamethrowers, and incendiary grenades, which are all sorts of fun. At least till you ignite yourself and die like a dummy. I mean, there's also a pretty large variety to the consumables you can carry and use as well, from a downright unrealistic flashlight. I mean, I used these elbow lights in the army. They could barely illuminate a small circle, let alone the entire damn room. Then you've also got flares, which can be used in creative ways, and not just the light areas via being held in your offhand or thrown. You can also use them to ignite, say, puddles of fuel on the floor and burn unsuspecting things. Hell, I ambushed an ambush from a grate in the roof by igniting a fuel puddle, which traced back to some barrels and blew the walkers to hell. Another thing I'd like to point out is the fantastic enemy variety. From small scuttlers, which like to ambush or attack in waves, and a variant of scuttler that shoots gross goo at you that will slow you down, to massive eruptions as they are called in-game, which act as the bosses. They are usually so big they burst through several parts of the environment and start taking over and infesting the environments. Plus there's the star of the show, the imposter things, which will often attempt to get you when you least expect it. While gameplay wise, this game it definitely has its clunk. Like, it can be a pain in the ass to cycle your weapons in the heat of the moment, and sometimes Blake does move a little quickly and will sometimes struggle in those moments when you have to walk tight rafters and such. But that's not really to be unexpected for many games of this era, and doesn't bother me too much. The only thing that really annoys me is later in the game, you start having to fight human enemies as well, consistently, that work for the general and want you dead. It's not like with the other survivors where you can reason and work with them. No, it's on sight, we're gonna kill you or you kill us, and it does get a bit annoying. The final gameplay things I should mention is there's a cold bar system. You stay out too long in the elements and you will freeze to death. So while you definitely want to explore for loot and shiny shit, you don't want to stay out too long. Try to duck into cover anytime you notice that bar dropping and warm up a bit. And finally, the game uses fixed save points, but they are unlimited. So be sure to save often, because if you die, it's either a reload your last save in the main menu or restart the level from the beginning. Though this can be beneficial to you, as you can use your newly attained knowledge to play through that level better. Now let's move on to the presentation and performance, shall we? Now, this is a game that lives up to the original film in this area, at least in my opinion. I love the fact that you're fellow soldiers and you are always on edge, worried about each other being an imposter, and afraid, waiting for that moment when you may turn on each other.
Hold it.
Pierce, it's Blake. It's okay. Put your weapon down.
No way. You're infected just like all the others.
I'm not.
Your word ain't shit, Captain. I found a report that says the only way to prove you're not one of those things is through a blood test. Now, there's a medical kit near the kennel. You go get it and come back here, and I'll watch you do the test.
Hell, if you shoot a fellow survivor and hurt them enough, they will light you up and panic running away.
You're gonna get us, Blake.
The way the game introduces you to the imposters is always pretty cool, as they use it to showcase the new blood hypo test developed for the game, and lo and behold, 2 out of the 4 people in the group are monsters. Best burn them quick. The game also likes to make good use of the various enemies. Scuttlers love to hide in holes and jump out at you, or rush you down in large waves. Walkers like to use their extra durability and ability to spawn scuttlers to their advantage to swarm you and beat you down. Some of the bosses are quite intensive, especially if you don't know exactly how to beat them, though I always find it funny that the first boss can be brute forced by just running up to the door, repairing the box, and eating medkits to keep topped off to skip the boss. It's entirely a valid tactic and I find that amusing. Honestly, my biggest complaint in this regard is the very light usage of soundtrack in the game, featuring what feels like 2 or 3 tracks, that being the menu theme and the credits theme. Though the credits theme is a banger of a song from the band Saliva, so bonus credit for that, I suppose. Performance-wise, I don't really have much complaints. The graphics look solid for the time period. I really enjoy the weather effects. And I didn't suffer much, if any, from frame drop or stuttering issues. So yeah, I'd say the performance is pretty good. Well, I think it's pretty obvious with how much detail I went into for the gameplay that I think this game is a definite buy. Even though the squad system could be a little jank, you gotta give it credit for how ahead of its time it really is. You didn't see anything else like this in 2002. This is probably one of my favorite horror games out there, at least for the PS2, Xbox, and PC generation of games. The biggest complaint I have is the annoying human enemies, as well as the lacking soundtrack. But I could easily overlook these for the sheer amount of fun I had with this game. Honestly, I'm sad that the sequel never came out, but hey, thankfully due to Night Dive Studios, this game's finally coming to modern systems and a new audience. So here's hoping it does better than the original did. And hey, maybe if it does well, we could get a sequel. So yeah, either go get the original game, or if you want to wait and try it out shinier, then check out the remaster that's supposed to be coming out in late 2024. I'd like to once again thank Kato Phoenix for her lovely artwork. I'd like to ask y'all to support the content however y'all can. And speaking of support, I also want to thank all the Twitch subs, the YouTube members, and the donors seen on screen. This has been Core, and I'll see y'all next time.